Take a second here. Live streaming. Okay, we seem to be live streaming, so we should be okay. I'm gonna hit record and I'll start.
Wonderful. Okay. Do I click that button?
No, don't click anything. You're good. As long as you can hear me, right, and everything?
Yes.
No problem?
Oh,
Okay. All right, here we go.
This meeting is being recorded.
3, 2, 1. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome anywhere you are in the U.S. or around the world. This is Pete Caliendo. I am your host, and we're ready to start Baseball Outside the Box, the show that loves to interview interesting people. And we have a great person that we're going to interview today. Before we start, don't forget, go to Baseball Outside the Box for actually baseballoutsidethebox.com for the audio. Thank you, ESPN Honolulu, also for the audio. And we are on Facebook Live, Twitter, and YouTube. So check us out there. If you're on Facebook Live and you have a question during our guests talking, we will take that in the comments section. Let us know, and we'll take all the questions we can get. All right, let's bring in our guest. Believe it or not, Nancy Finley. This is think about it. Her dad was one of the guys that worked with the Oakland A's. She's going to tell you more about it. She's the daughter of Carl Finley, and also, and one of the partners of the team, and obviously, well-known Charlie Finley. We're going to talk about Charlie also. So let's not even waste any time. We'll get right to the questions. Let's welcome Nancy Finley. How you doing, Nancy?
thank you. Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. This is interesting because, I grew up a baseball fan as a little kid, and I saw, Oakland, obviously. I saw a lot of teams, and we're going to get into your background a little bit. But before we do it, kind of let the audience know a little bit about you. So I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you, and then give us some answers, and we'll start with the interview right after that, because I think it'll be a lot of fun. People get to know you a lot better that way. The most important question, obviously, is, where'd you grow up?
Dallas, Kansas City, Overland Park, and then Oakland, California.
Awesome. And as a kid, favorite sport, baseball? Or do you have another favorite sport before that?
I actually liked riding horses and playing ping pong.
Oh yeah, I love ping pong. That's and if you do it right, it's a pretty good workout too. People don't think so.
Oh, I know it is.
I'm
really good at it, everyone. I'm great at it.
Is that what you did as a young girl?
Yes.
You rode horses and played ping pong a lot?
Yes, I rode horses where we boarded our mascot, the mule, Charlie O.
Awesome, man. We're going to talk about Charlie O. How about a country that you like to visit you haven't been to?
Iceland or New Zealand.
Yeah, great spots. I've been to both. Those are awesome places.
Really?
Yes, been very lucky. Been to 50 countries. Just fortunate. What about, favorite major league player of all time? Could be anybody. Could be with the A's or anywhere.
Jim Catfish Hunter.
Again, we're going to talk about Jim Catfish because you're is it your uncle? What do we call him? Charlie O?
Yes. Now, does anyone know Jim Hunter's middle name?
I only went Jim Hunter Catfish, no?
Well, his birth
That's his
name.
nickname.
Yes. His middle name is Augustus, which was my father's middle name.
Oh, wow.
Not a
And I was reading, I didn't want to jump ahead, but I was reading that your uncle, Charlie O, he actually paid the players $300 or gave them a bonus if they would get that great mustache.
It's 72, and that's not easy to get going.
No, I could imagine. I had a tough time with a regular mustache. How about your uncle, the A's? What was his team that he wanted to beat all the time, no matter what, even if it wasn't a playoff team, just somebody wanted to beat?
Well, the Yankees, of course.
Yeah.
The Yankees. I just remember hearing that. Yankee this, Yankee that. But the players turned out to be most of my father's good friends.
Well, I could imagine. He was in the game a long time. How about in school? What did you like in school?
Geography and politics.
Oh, you got into the politics. Still into the politics now?
No, but I follow it. at least I know what's going on. But my husband, by the way, is Ukrainian.
Oh, you know what? And a special, I always do this before the show, special heartwarm to all the people, prayers to all the people in Ukraine. I've been there 5 times. I've got a lot of friends in the baseball industry in Ukraine. We helped build the field there. There are a lot of things we're doing. So I'm always online with them. Thank goodness. So far, I can still keep in touch with them on WhatsApp and Messenger on Facebook. So prayers to everybody in Ukraine.
Let them know about the A's. Yes. Yes.
Your husband, was he born there?
I'm sorry.
Was he born in Ukraine?
No, his mother, his mother or her father they immigrated to Canada. He was born in Canada.
And what have you guys got a chance to go there at all?
No, have not. His brother was president of Rotary for 1 year. It only lasts 1 year. And at that time, his brother invited Russia and the Ukraine to join, because that's right after the wall went down. And so Mikhail Gorbachev was with them for dinner.
Yeah, and you want to mention, I always mention to my audience, the special prayers also to the Russian people, because there's a lot of Russian people that have family in Ukraine, vice versa. So this doesn't affect just Ukraine. Obviously, it affects Ukraine the most with all the damage and the lives that have been lost. But we do have Russian people also that get affected by this. So, well, let's do this. Let's start off with, I think the best way to start this whole thing off, because it's going to be very interesting, and simply, what was it like? Your dad was a partner, right? What was it like growing up in a baseball family?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was thinking back on Kansas City, and it was like a Disneyland inside that stadium. I loved it. But I don't really remember how we went inside. I know we were driven, and then next thing I know, we're inside the stadium. Now, former President Harry Truman sat about 2 seats from us. He had season tickets.
Wasn't Truman was he the one that was had been the most games of any president?
That I haven't checked that record, but he was there all the time. Apparently, I sat on his lap, played with his tie, because my mom would be talking with other mothers, but Truman actually paid attention to me. So that was, I don't know what that was like, but he was very nice, and always at the games. A very good, very loyal fan.
Now, you growing up, you became a baseball fan.
I was born one. I think that came before my childhood. Yeah. I was at the stadium with the measles in quarantine when the Beatles came through and played for the first US tour. They were there, and my mom, who's a nurse, was with me in a front office in quarantine, but I could hear. And I knew that the crowd sounded different. Females screaming. It wasn't like I usually heard, but I was halfway out of it.
Yeah, and I was reading, because I was reading, first of all, we're going to talk about your book in a little bit, but I was also reading your article online, and that mentioned that in '64, Charlie Finley paid the Beatles $150,000 to perform there.
Yes.
But what was it like? Because you now are working as a young girl in the front office on promotions and advertising. So you learned the business from the ground up.
That was Oakland. Yes. I was too small in Kansas City, but in Oakland, I wrote my first press release at age 14.
Wow.
Well, someone needed to do it at that time. And I remember the mistake I made. I didn't put a date on it. So you do these things, you learn, sometimes from embarrassment. And then it was nothing to me. I was really good at it.
And it also sounds like I think your dad ran the front office pretty much, right? He ran the operations.
Oh, yes. He would go to the ticket office, walk all the way down to minor leagues, controller. Oh, yeah. The Monty Moore had a desk next to my dad's, but Monty was only in. He came in about 4:00 when the team was in town. Then he would go upstairs to do the show.
What was the difference? Well, Charlie Finley obviously was a visionary, and and we're going to talk about some of those things that one of them was like I just talked about was the Beatles. I mean, he did a lot of things that people are doing nowadays. But what was the difference between your dad and him?
Dad was the constant. Dad, by the way, was a high school principal in Dallas, Texas, when Charlie asked him to join him.
Oh, wow.
So, yes. And Dad had gone to law school, but he wanted to go into education, into being a superintendent of the state. So he was back at the high school. He'd just been promoted when Charlie made that offer. Dad was 37, and it took him 6 months to decide, but every weekend there would be tickets, waived round trip tickets for Dad, all paid for, to fly to Kansas City and watch Charlie, watch how it's done. And Charlie went out of his way to impress Dad, but it still took 6 months. I heard from one of his high school students who told me Dad never gave a reason for leaving. Knowing Dad, he probably thought he would need to come back in a year or two. How would he know they would be in a playoff 9 years later?
Yeah, and 3 World Series, right? I mean, 19.
Yeah, yes, neither one had a background in baseball.
Right? Neither one played the game at all?
No. Well, I heard Charlie played a local game where he lived, but no, they were not professional sports players. Dad was in business management. He was academic. Charlie did not have a degree, but he started his own insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where they were. When Charlie had the money, he bought the team, and Dad was very good running the office. Charlie wanted Dad to review everything for him, contracts, be there to bounce something off of you. Should I do this? Should I not? Charlie did his own thing anyway. But when Charlie wanted to go to all white shoes in Oakland, he brought the prototype pair of shoes to a restaurant to show Dad.
Interesting. And obviously he trusted him. I mean, he was like an advisor to him.
Yeah, Dad could also predict what Charlie would say. And I didn't even realize that till I was a teenager. And I remember Dad told me once I shouldn't wear jeans out to dinner. I said, well, jeans are in now. They're fashion. Charlie gets in the car at the airport. He says, oh, I used to wear those to milk the cows. I mean, Dad knew. He could predict what Charlie would say.
They also had to convince him because Charlie owned 2 teams, a hockey and a basketball team.
He owned, you're right. 3.
He had to convince to sell it, right?
You're right. And Dad was not happy because Charlie didn't really consult with Dad, and Charlie expected Dad to do the same with those teams.
He did want him to sell.
That's right. Well, Dad quit. He quit because Charlie did not understand. Dad was serious. So Dad quit and wrote a book, actually, in a very short amount of time. And Charlie needed him back because the front office was falling apart. And I never saw the book again, but Dad was given a $9,000 advance by Life magazine. And this was 1971.
Oh, wow.
It was before, the wins.
Charlie Finley, obviously a very interesting person, and you were around him a great deal. Tell us about him. What was he like? Why was he special? Why, his thinking was different. Where did he get that?
Well, when I was little, he would say, come to Uncle Charlie. And it would sort of intimidate me as a little girl. But when I remember in the 70s, actually, after his divorce, we became friends. He started inviting me out with the adults when he came to town. And he was very sincere, and he liked to brainstorm, and no one was allowed to say something was stupid. So that's good. That causes you to open up and say anything. And he once liked something I said so much, he made me a VP when I was 16.
Wow. And I like that because, that's how you get a lot of great information if you let people open up their minds and, and not worry about, is it a bad idea?
If I'm in a meeting and I think someone, has that attitude and might say that, I clam up. So
You know,
that is true.
and you know, I would have loved to interview them simply because our show is called Baseball Outside the Box, because we're thinking outside the box all the time and how to make coaches better. But in general, you know, to think outside the box, not always kind of do the traditional things that have always been done. Anybody can do that. Just follow what someone's doing. But the outside the box stuff is what Charlie was famous for.
Oh my God, that was my role model. Dad and Charlie were my role models. But I guess I sort of lived that way. But one thing I did hear that I would hear some friends' mothers say is, you don't do that. Or we don't do that. I never heard that kind of talk from Dad and Charlie. And that was refreshing. I never understood why the mothers said that. But once when I was at the Coliseum, I was bored. So I called a classmate on a weekend. And I remember the mother said, asked where I was. I told her, and there was silence. She didn't quite understand why I would call if I was at a Coliseum. To her, I should be having fun and having a party or something.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, as I think about it in the article, you know, there were some things obviously that were written about Charlie, and you kind of pushed back on some of these items. I was reading, you know, because he had some, I guess, some confrontations with, you know, with some writers at times. One was with the Kansas City Star, I believe. What were some of the things that you were pushing back?
That was more than a confrontation. That was he found out when he bought the team. He found that payments had been going out to that writer, substantial monthly payments, and he didn't want to continue it. So he asked some people what he should do. He decided to cut it off, but at the same time, he fired his first general manager, who was a friend of that reporter. So everything came to a head, but then Charlie also divulged in a newspaper article about the payments. So after that, the local newspaper started saying we wanted to move, which was not true. Not true. So that was something that was started to try to get the fans angry.
Yeah, and I noticed even now, though, you know, Oakland's trying to get a new stadium or either move. They still haven't really resolved that at all.
That part, though, is really going on. But with us, the rumor started that we wanted to move, and we didn't. We didn't. What Charlie would do that would hurt him, though, is when he found out the Chiefs were paying $1 a year for their lease, he would say, well, I should move if Kansas City doesn't give me the same respect. That kind of thing played into it. But yeah, the newspaper kept saying we wanted to move. At one point, I think they said we didn't like our fans, we didn't like season ticket holders. It was just nonstop.
Why I think that was going on? Why was those rumors going on? What were they trying to accomplish?
They wanted us out. Well, when Charlie refused to continue those payments to the newspaper, they wanted us out. And they got us out. We didn't choose to move at that time. Dad wanted to move to Dallas when they had a stadium ready, if we still needed to. Dad had a lot of friends in Kansas City. He never intended to move at that time, but they raised the lease amount on us so much that Dad said they had to go. They didn't think they would be leaving until after that meeting.
Do you remember how they got to Oakland, how that all worked out?
That was because when they went to this council meeting in '67, they learned that their lease was being raised to over $1 million a year. Then all of a sudden, Dad and Charlie thought, okay, we've got to get out of here. We'll go into debt if we stay here. The only place that said it had a ready to move in Coliseum was Oakland, and Oakland had been calling a lot. Dad said it was sort of tiring how often they called. They called, it was like a solicitor sort of. And they kept saying, remember, we're here, because they would read these articles and think we wanted to move. So Dad said he called them and they said the Coliseum was in a turnkey, like when you walk in, you don't have to do a thing. It's ready. And what they left out was the front office isn't complete, but it is standing, it's ready. So that's why Dad said it was one of the hardest things he's ever done, is organize a Major League Baseball move.
Yeah, I could imagine. What was that first year in Oakland like?
Well, it was relief because I wasn't living in Oakland yet, but I remember what Dad said, not having the media the way they were was a relief. I mean, sure, the media in Oakland had heard rumors from Kansas City, but they were willing to give us a chance. So that was a relief. We had Joe DiMaggio. It was just a new location. And then Reggie and Vida started to come out and do well. So it was good. Dad actually brought Rick Mundy with him to help get the word out. They attended breakfast meetings and talked about the A's. So it was just a lot of trying to figure things out. Things weren't complete in the first year. And then Dad asked Oakland when the front office would be finished, and they kept promising. And it was never finished. In fact, Charlie spent $500,000 of his own money right after buying Kansas City to renovate that stadium he didn't own. So because of what happened in Kansas City, he was not about to put his own money out to do the Oakland office.
Sure, and you're talking about Louis. He pretty much lost the 500,000 once they left.
Yeah, he did. So because Oakland said they were ready to move into, Dad said that's what they expected. And they took Oakland on at its word that it would finish the front office. The truth is, it was not finished until the team was sold. And the Haas family came in and spent quite a bit of money to finish it. But that Oakland should have done that.
Nancy, one of the first things he did was he changed the uniform colors, green, gold, and white. What was that like? What was the reaction?
Well, I loved it because that's when I was really young. Everything was, I mean, the renovation of the Coliseum was painted different colors, fluorescent, this and that. We had white sheep dyed different colors grazing on the field. We had a man dressed in a striped colored robe holding a staff.
Yeah.
Some people asked me if my parents gave me cough syrup when I was little because it sounds so outrageous. But we had a petting zoo with caged monkeys and peacocks roaming. It was amazing. I remember fireworks after every home run. I would be sure to hold my ears. We had the rabbit coming up out of the ground, Harvey, with flashing red lights. That scared some visiting players.
Was that the rabbit? Was that the rabbit for the baseballs for the home plate umpire, right? The automatic rabbit came out of the ground.
Yes, Harvey. Someone, yes, there's a collector shop in a small suburb of Kansas City that asked my permission to do Harvey on their front window. So Harvey's, yeah, there are a lot of memories for Harvey. And then the governor of Missouri gave us a mule, but it was meant for our petting zoo. But then Charlie thought, why not have it as a mascot? Because we had the elephant on our stationery until then.
Yeah, I remember that. So then they had the mule, and then I read something about orange-colored baseballs. What was that for?
That was in the 70s. In a way, I consider orange sort of like our side color because of that. We had those cones on the road, the type of orange.
Yep.
We wanted baseballs with that color, and to me, that sort of seems right. Now, have you heard of synesthesia?
No.
Okay. When my daughter was about 10, she told me one day she was real bothered about seeing colors and stuff. So I Googled it. I found a doctor, and she was diagnosed with synesthesia. Every time she saw a color like green would be number 2.
Mm-hmm.
White would be 1. So the doctor said it's a genetic phenomena. He said there's probably someone in your family or maybe a generation back who has it. I was trying to figure out who, and I'm looking around. I see the green baseball bat, the orange baseball, and all of a sudden it hit me. That's what Charlie had. He had all the characteristics. And my daughter likes to ask me what colors he did for certain things, and she'll say, yeah, I get that. But I think that Charlie saw that when he was watching the games, and that phenomenon might have helped him decide who should play what. I know it sounds a little odd, but there's something to it. People with that are supposed to be very creative, think differently.
Well, speaking about creativity, he was definitely creative. I mean, he advanced things a lot further. He understood that there was a game going on, but there needed to be entertainment around that game to keep the fans going the whole time.
All girls.
Yeah.
And then MC Hammer. Well, Hammer was Stanley Burrell. He was there as Dad's runner because I couldn't go in locker rooms. So Hammer was a real big help to Dad. He would sit next to Dad. And I remember it was all the people who came out from being with us ended up famous. We had a lot of Miss Americas. You ask about a sport. When I was little, Dad would say, let's watch the Miss America pageant. And we would bet a penny on what state would win. And I remember the women in my family were never enthusiastic about it. It wasn't until I got older I understood what it was about. But Dad and Charlie loved the Miss Americas. They were always at our World Series after parties. So and
I would think in those days, I think times have changed, but in those days, I mean, there were a lot of men that were watching the game, probably more than women, so having cheerleaders there kept you a little bit more entertaining. I mean, just the common fact.
That's what the ball girls were. And I noticed we never hired anyone through a newspaper ad. It was always through referrals or office workers. One of the ball girls was a sister to our switchboard operator. And when she came in to visit, Dad called Charlie and said, you've got to see how this one looks. And so they thought that roll up, and they asked her if she had a friend in high school who could be number 2. That's how it happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would have worked out in today's society. We'd have been in trouble a little bit there. The media would have been on that right away.
How about Hot Pants Day? Everyone was in hot pants.
Yeah, that wouldn't happen nowadays. Where did Charlie hang out during games? Where was he most of the time?
Most of the time he was up in his suite.
So he had no problem watching the game, right?
No. In fact, I sat with everyone at the World Series behind the dugout. Usually I wasn't allowed down there. Dad was very aware of foul balls and what someone's face could look like after being hit. So Dad figured I could sit down there with the family. They would watch me. And I was a nervous wreck during games. I would look over at Charlie and he was just intense. I don't know how he could stay so calm.
And that's why I asked, because you look at Billy Beane, the GM of the A's nowadays. I mean, you watch Moneyball, and a lot of times he'd go to the weight room. He couldn't watch it.
He couldn't watch it. I know. I don't know how Charlie had the strength to do that. I mean, just focus. He was intense focus.
Said that he was sometimes interfere with the game, wouldn't he?
Well, I don't know if you call it interfere. One time someone told me that the manager made a decision to do A, B, and C, and I thought, well, why would you let a manager make that decision if you know it's contrary to what the outcome could be? So in my mind, that's what I was around. That's what I experienced, is that you step in and you say what you think it should be, even if your manager might not agree. To me, I was raised with that.
Would he call down there? He would call in the dugout, do you know?
Oh yeah, he would go down there. I don't see that as interference. If it's a team you own, it's your money.
Sure.
And you see something is not right, or you have another idea. If your idea fails, then it's on you. So I don't see why someone would be upset. If I was a manager, I'd say, okay, sure. I mean, I never understood that.
Yeah, no, and I asked that because, fans would not know that goes on. Those are kind of like behind the scenes. No fan would know that, hey, there's an owner that's actually going to call down there.
He had a phone with him.
What's that?
Oh, he always had his phone at the dugout, but I thought other owners had the same thing. Or he had a phone up in the press box too.
Sure, and they usually down into the dugout. What about managers? He kind of butted head with. Did he butt heads with some of the managers? Any particular?
He did. I remember though hearing about when he fired Alvin Dark the first time in '67. It went so smooth, and I found out that Charlie had reserved a room that night for him and Dad to stay in because apparently they knew Dark was having an affair, and they stayed up all night with a glass to the wall. So, but that was when they fired Dark, but it was a very night, like, we're sorry we have to do this. And that was the same day Dark predicted that our guys would be in the 71 playoffs. So we brought him back for 74, 75, because he knew the team really well.
Because
You're going in and
Hall of Famers.
You're going in and out.
Should
I click this box so I can hear more?
No. Does it say do that?
Let me see. No. Oh, it was going in and out.
Yeah, no, it could be the internet also sometimes because of weather. And they had obviously a lot of Hall of Famers like Jack and Rough Fingers, Catfish Hunter, a lot of great players. You mentioned Catfish Hunter being your favorite player or person. Why was that?
He was very, just overall a good person, polite, he acted like the type who never had to have the last word, modest. Gosh, he was what I call my guys. When I was real little, I looked up to him and Sal Bando, Dick Green, Campy. Those were my guys that I left in Kansas City, and I expected to see them back. It was like my family. So, and I was when they found out about his diagnosis, there was a private gathering before the press conference. I was there, and there wasn't a dry eye. Our players loved each other like a family.
And, that's, and again, I think that's why they were so successful, because you see a lot of teams that, that's that chemistry people are talking about all the time, right? That makes winners.
Yes. You need to keep a majority of your players to create that family. Now, we had to trade. I remember the free agency. I heard all about that. And Charlie was up against a clock apparently because of that. And then the commissioner blocked it. And I'm thinking, how many trades you hear about that that are allowed? I didn't want those guys to be traded. I didn't want that at all. But apparently, because of free agency, it had to be. Now, Charlie had another proposal for a free agency, but that was turned down.
And then obviously the game's changed, boy. You see now you're always trying to figure out where players are at because they're on different teams all the time. At times, it really changed.
I know. Are they able to really keep players? That's what I wonder is, what are the teams who have kept the majority of their players?
Yeah, you see somebody like Houston, they've done a pretty good job of it. They're top players, and it's not easy. Even being in Chicago, the Cubs, they won the World Series in 2016. 3-4 years later, they had to unload a lot of players because the salaries can get too expensive after a while because they had a lot of good players.
Yeah, I know. Houston did a good job forming that club. I mean, really, they came back. I was very impressed. I know. I know how to make a winning team, but it's not hard. It's just I don't understand why some people do. Why some managers do what they do with teams.
Well, I think that's what's fun about the game in some ways. That's what keeps us interested, right? We're always trying to figure out why, what teams are trying to do, what managers are trying to do, and
I want to tell them what to do. Yeah.
Well, I do have, I've had Jim Lefebvre on the show. He was a former Seattle manager, also, here with the Cubs, good friend of mine. In the old days, he used to tell me the stories that owners would call down in the clubhouse, remember, and actually say to them, why did you bat that guy? Or why did you do that? So it's not that that didn't happen. It did happen.
But they should have said something before it happened. See, this is what Charlie did, not second guessing, but try to do try to stop it. Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
point. Now, I
And
also read that, was it true that Charlie called Bowie Kuhn a village idiot?
yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Why? Why?
Kuhn tried to make his life, which meant our life, hell. I mean, excuse me, but
Really?
it just seemed like it was a personal vendetta on Kuhn's part. And now there is a review of Kuhn's bio that appeared in a Chicago newspaper, 1987, by Jerome Holtzman.
Mhm.
And he said that. He said in Kuhn's bio, it seems obsessed about Charlie. And that answered it. I mean, Charlie never thought about Kuhn. He never talked about him all the time unless he was on the defense. But Kuhn seemed obsessed about Charlie's looks, the way he talked. He looked down at him just because. And so I remember it just seemed like Kuhn was constantly on us for something. He didn't want us to make any profit. And then in my book, I have a whole chapter on Kuhn in part 2.
Oh, good, good. I'm looking forward to reading that. Matter of fact, now, did he not like also maybe all the promotions he did? Because maybe he thought
He didn't like that at all. Oh, he didn't like that at all. I think he had names for them. Oh, he thought Finley was just the dregs of the earth. I mean, he did not like it, but it was in a snooty way. Which, I mean, obviously, you don't do that to someone, but Kuhn could. I think Kuhn abused his power. He would use the excuse that it was for the good of baseball, but that was because it was for his good.
wow.
I think he abused his power. And if anyone disagrees with me, they should call you.
Yes, and well, here's what they should do, and we're going to put it on our show notes. The book, The Finley Ball, right? How two outsiders turned the Oakland A's into a dynasty and changed the game forever. That's a great book. So that's a good lead-in because there's a chapter there with Bowie Kuhn.
Well, in part 2, there is my Bowie Kuhn chapter didn't have room to go in this book, but I have a whole chapter devoted to Kuhn. I talk about free agency. I just explain what it is. Also, the DH was our idea. Kuhn was against it. Whenever Kuhn was against something, he could sway most of the owners to vote against it. But we didn't mean for it to continue. I see how both leagues are for it now, and I'm thinking, you don't have to be, guys. You can just stop it. Who knew how popular that would be?
Well, again, futuristic. I mean, he had that vision because I'm a big DH fan. I don't want to see pitchers hit. I'm tired of seeing pitchers hit. I want to see hitters hit. And I think you're seeing it right now, a great benefit in Major League Baseball because more players are signing and staying in the game because they can DH now, right? There's 15 more teams.
And I don't see it attributed to us. When I see all the talk about it, I'm thinking, well, why isn't anyone saying Finley's idea? Because I remember the champagne popping when it went through. It was January 1st, 73. But I mean, I remember a lot of fighting to get that in. And I don't hear.
Yeah, but you know, people don't like to always give credit where credit's due. It's unfortunate, but if you look at the things Charlie did and the team did off the field, you know, within the fans and all that, now all of a sudden you're seeing a lot of those things going on now. And Major League Baseball is even trying to figure out how do we entertain the fan more, right?
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, I hear that this year they're going to allow ads on uniforms.
Yeah, that you would have thought baseball would have never done that. Well, they're also allowing gambling too, sponsors for gambling.
Oh, that is an addiction. That is in the same category as other addictions. I don't get that. I really don't. But yeah, when we changed our color, when we brought colors to the uniform, I can't imagine why people aren't more up in arms over ads being on uniforms.
Yeah. How about what else did Charlie do? Because I only saw a few things there. But
Series games.
Yeah. His idea.
Yes. I see Kuhn take credit for a lot of that.
What was that?
That was
What idea?
the night games for World Series, because he said there are working people and kids who should be able to watch. Now, when I read about Kuhn, like his bio, most of what I read was our idea. I'm looking for something that is original Kuhn. That was his idea. I'm not seeing it. Anyway, okay, I'll stop bashing Kuhn.
No. But people can read the book, the other book, when it comes out. But so fine, let's finish it off with the book. Tell us anything else about the book. Why should people buy this book?
Well, I tell the story about how we started in the 60s. We were going really great. And Charlie was referred to as one of the most beloved owners in baseball in a June 1961 Sports Illustrated article. Who would think it? He went from that to the negative press after August 1961. And then the negative press just continued because Charlie stopped the payments to the press.
Right. Yeah, but then he got the A's and 3 World Series and a lot of Hall of Famers and some great players.
Yes, it's like after we moved to Oakland, there was more freedom. There wasn't the heaviness of the bad press. Some of the writers were told, he's not good, but I think writers kept an open mind. And then, yes, we started winning, which is why Charlie bought a hockey team. Dad said he thought we had the Midas touch, but Dad reminded Charlie, we got in this for baseball. We need to stay focused. So Charlie,
as you worked for the A's, when you were there, when you saw certain trades, were there any trades that you said, wow, why did we do that?
Yes. Well, Rick Monday, I really liked. I got close to him, and I know Dad was not happy about that. And then, but I really didn't get close to the players we traded. Interesting. I know that Dad was the type who liked to stay in one place. The agreement with Charlie was wherever the team moved, Dad would live there. That's a reason I tell people that when you hear about almost moving to Atlanta or Seattle, it wasn't going to happen unless Dad agreed to live there. It was all just bluffing.
All right, Nancy, last question. This has been great. How do you want people to remember your dad and Charlie Finley?
Well, as building a dynasty, they built with no background, no experience. Within 9 years, they built a winning team. A dynasty, according to the Hall of Fame, is 3 consecutive wins. We had that with the World Series, which is very tough. Then, after free agency, we rebuilt the team starting in '77, which led to the 1981 playoffs. Unfortunately, we had sold the team. I think that surprised us, but that shows how quick we could rebuild. It's just amazing. I watched Dad do some of the scouting in the late '70s, which Ricky Henderson was one, and rebuilding the team exactly the way Dad and Charlie talked about. It happened.
You know what? And you couldn't have ended the show better than that. And I'll tell you why. Baseball has got to be one of the toughest sports, not only to repeat in, but when you're talking about 3 world championships in a row, that is simply amazing. And I know you should never say it's never going to happen again, but I'd be very suspect if that ever happens again in baseball.
It needs to be done right. I mean, that's the thing. They need to take advice from, look at the history. It is. It's very difficult to do, especially now with all the playoffs they have to go through. But don't just read a manual. I see that. I see some people just go strictly by the manual. Think outside the box.
Absolutely. And Nancy, how do they get the book? How do people get
Amazon.
the book?
Amazon. Amazon. My website is oaklandathleticshistory.com.
oaklandathleticshistory.com. All right. We will We will put that on our show notes. And Nancy, can't thank you enough. It's great meeting you.
Thank you. I had great meeting you too. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is Nancy Finley. Thank you to Nancy. Thank you to Brian Crocker, our producer with the Lineup Media Group. Thanks to everybody in the U.S. and around the world for joining us. Keep, spreading the word, spread the show. BaseballSideTheBox.com is the audio. Remember, also ESPN Honolulu. Thank you for hosting the show. And of course, everybody on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you share the show, we just keep getting better and better. More audience, and that really helps us get the show out. So thanks, folks. Remember, stay healthy, stay safe. God bless you all, and we'll see you on the next show.